Hello and welcome to Katie Pavlich Tonight. We saw a lot of new activity at Nancy Guthrie's house today. We'll go there live straight ahead. But first, President Trump set a new record for the longest State of the Union address last night. In addition to many special guests recognized in the House gallery, there was some unrequested audience participation from Democrats. For the second year in a row, Texas Democrat Congressman Al Green was ejected from the chamber for disrupting, despite pleas from his party's leaders to avoid sideshows. Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar also couldn't help herself as President Trump called out sanctuary cities and lax immigration policies.
Ashamed of yourself. That is why I'm also asking you to end deadly sanctuary cities that protect the criminals and enact serious penalties for public officials who block the removal of criminal aliens. In many cases, drug lords, murderers all over our country, they're blocking the removal of these people out of our country, and you should be ashamed of yourself.
Lots of pins and buttons, too. Meanwhile, the Democrats' counter-programming for those who boycotted the official event included frogs. So life continues in the swamp, frogs and all, despite not getting a mention in last night's address. Epstein investigations continue with the House Oversight Committee's depositions of Bill and Hillary Clinton getting started tomorrow. To discuss this, let's bring in Democratic strategist and former Hillary for America digital team member Kaivan Shroff and Wold, who previously served as Assistant Attorney General and Deputy Assistant to President Trump. Thank you both for joining me tonight. Kaivan, I love your jackets. You seem to always have a great jacket for us. So thanks for bringing your fashion game. Theo, let's start with you. Some Democrats last night clearly ignored guidance from Hakeem Jeffries, other leadership by avoiding making scenes during Trump's speech. But even when they weren't doing anything, they managed to send a message. Here's what Trump said about Democrats and their refusal to stand at this point in his address.
But surely we can all agree no state can be allowed to rip children from their parents' arms and transition them to a new gender against the parents' will. Who would believe that we're even talking about this? We must ban it, and we must ban it immediately. Look, nobody stands up. These people are crazy, I'm telling you. They're crazy.
So, Theo, it seems like there was a lot in the speech last night that Democrats could have gotten on board with, and yet they refused to even stand up if they were attending and not boycotting.
Yeah, I mean, half of congressional Democrats skipped the president's speech so they could dance with frog people from Portland and an ICE activist dressed as a giraffe. And the other half confirmed what a lot of Americans have long suspected, which is that Democrats are not interested in serving the interests of America's citizens, but are willing to put illegal aliens first across the board. There's really no better embodiment of the Democrat Party of today than what we saw last night.
Kaivan, I mean, if you look at that, when the president said it is important to stand up for Americans over the interests of illegal aliens, and Democrats just sat there. I mean, this is an issue that Trump won the presidency on. Do you think this is something that's going to hurt Democrats in the midterms, especially given the antics of the other side, of, as Theo just mentioned, the frogs and the giraffes? It's like, are we adults or are we children?
Well, I will say, those frogs and giraffes, part of the imagery, right, of all the viral content that has happened with ICE sort of attacking protesters has included those figures. So a lot of Americans will recognize that, and that's why they showed up there. But we talked about this last week before when we were talking about the State of the Union. I'm not a big fan of sort of the protesting and the heckling because it distracts from the message. And I think Democrats had strong messaging coming into the State of the Union on the economy, on immigration, on foreign affairs. And of course, you know, I saw Leland predict that maybe Jasmine Crockett will try to have a moment at these hearings. She has a tough primary coming up next week. We saw Al Green pull that stunt because he has a tough primary coming up next week. It's this prisoner's dilemma, right? Where if everyone behaves, the Democratic caucus looks mature and better, and that's what Hakeem Jeffries asked for, but every individual has an incentive to cheat and try to have that viral moment. So I think that's what we saw.
And Democrats are getting pushed from their left, so they have to get more and more extreme.
Well, you know,
Theo,
I thought it was interesting, right?
Go ahead.
Well, so I was just going to say, Spanberger was selected to give the rebuttal, and
Yes,
I think
she
if
was.
you were watching the news last year, it was all about Mamdani and how far left the party's gone. She is full-on center. She's a NatSec mom.
I think we will debate that actually right now, Theo. Of course, they chose the new governor from Virginia who campaigned as a so-called moderate. But when you look at the record of Democrats who just took over the legislature there and the governor's mansion, they immediately proposed a slew of new taxes after saying they were campaigning on affordability, things like taxes on dog walking, on electric leaf blowers, on home repairs. We already hate the property tax on cars, and yet they wanted more. So is this a dishonest way of campaigning to say that Democrats are moderate in the middle, and then once they get in power, they want to take everyone's money, not from the rich, but from people who want to groom their dogs?
Yeah, it's an entirely dishonest way of campaigning, but Democrats have perfected it. This is what they've been doing for the last 10, 15, 20 years. And look, Spanberger is she's the current exemplification of this same pattern we saw with Obama and others, which is give us some milquetoast, kind of middle-of-the-road jargon, but immediately upon taking office, it's a race to see who can create Santa Monica in the Old Dominion. And policy after policy, that's what she's been doing. I will say, though, the one thing that was so interesting about Democrats last night is that President Trump once again used the State of the Union to make his speech really about the American people, a celebration of the American citizen. And that's like the recurring theme of this presidency is the State of the Union is actually measured by how well American citizens are doing. And what we see from Democrats is the exact opposite. How well are foreign nationals doing in our country? How well are they able to loot and plunder the American taxpayer?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Republican strategists will be using that in the months to come. Kaivan, I want to turn to the depositions of the Clintons that are starting tomorrow. A piece in the New York Times today calls Hillary's involvement the latest Stand By Your Man movement. Leland also made that point during his show. You've been defending the Clintons. Do you think that Hillary is getting an unfair shake here and that she's not involved in the Epstein files, and yet Bill's dragged her into another precarious situation?
Well, I actually think the main unfair shake she's getting is from the New York Times, and that's not surprising because it's incredibly sexist to frame them as her standing by her man. She's complying with a congressional subpoena, okay? I mean, that's what's happening here. I do have to say, in terms of spinning the facts, actually, it's really interesting because this is such a distraction they're throwing out there. Hillary Clinton's not mentioned in the files at all, but just like you just did in the last question, right? Abigail Spanberger doesn't support a single one of those taxes you mentioned, but you had to go pull that out, random bills, random people introduced because you got nothing. And that's where we see Republicans with this Clinton testimony as well.
Those tax increases were not random.
She doesn't support them.
And they certainly
she doesn't
will be
support
back.
them. Anyone can Google that she doesn't support them.
Okay.
So how is that an attack on her? She is a moderate.
Her entire party
Wrong.
does, and they haven't been completely
Wrong.
erased. But
Wrong.
I want to get to
Otherwise
this.
they'd be
I want to
law.
get to this before we leave. This is actually very important because it's about the weaponization of government. Theo, Reuters reported today that the FBI was monitoring the phone calls of the current FBI director, Kash Patel, when he was not the FBI director, of course, and his now chief of staff, Susie Wiles, when she was the co-campaign manager of his 2024 presidential campaign. What is your reaction to that, given your experience at the Department of Justice?
Yeah, this is more of the same that we've seen from both the Obama and Biden DOJs. They claim, this rule of law, but instead what they're doing is investigating pro-life activists. They're investigating Catholic churches in Richmond. And now we come to discover that they were once again using surveillance and investigatory techniques to look at the Trump campaign and senior figures in Trump world. This is not surprising at all, but it should shock every American.
Yes, it should. All right, unlike President Trump, we don't have unlimited time tonight, so we'll have to leave it there. Kaivan Shroff, Theo Wold, thank you so much for joining me tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, despite all the division and outbursts at Trump's address, there was at least one moment where nearly everyone was in agreement.
Let's also ensure that members of Congress cannot corruptly profit from using insider information. Did Nancy Pelosi stand up if she's here? Doubt it. Pass the Stop Insider Trading Act without delay.
While there may have been applause in the room, politicians on both sides of the aisle have been using their positions to outperform the stock markets by huge margins, conveniently. Joining us now, the man who helped bring this issue to the forefront, Chris Joseph, founder of the Nancy Pelosi Stock Tracker. So, Chris, I want to get your response to the president calling Nancy Pelosi out by name. Of course, she's not the only one engaging in this practice, but what did you make of that, given your work on this issue?
I found it pretty ironic. I mean, to give Trump credit, he's the first president that has ever actually called for a ban in congressional stock trading, especially at, a State of the Union in front of all of America to see. But of course, he had to kind of take a little bit of a jab at the queen herself, Nancy Pelosi. She's the one best known for it. She's the one kind of that has brought the entire issue to the public eye. And yes, she is not the only one doing it, but I think if we can continue with this momentum and kind of like continue calling her out, continue calling out the other politicians that we see, we actually can get a ban passed. And that is kind of what we do. And that's why I started it to begin with.
So for those who may not be familiar, what exactly would the ban be on? Why does there need to be a ban? And what are members of Congress doing that means they're making more money than the average person? Do they have insider information, for example?
That's the question. So back in 2020, actually, I'm not a political guy. I wasn't really studying this, but I was just a finance guy. I realized that politicians are actually allowed to trade stocks. And while average Americans, news people, finance people, they can't trade individual stocks. Meanwhile, politicians are allowed to do it. Before 2009, they weren't even allowed. They didn't have to publicly share anything. The ban, what it would happen and why Trump wants to get after it is because people think they're insider trading and they're doing it right before our very eyes. They're trading stocks that they probably shouldn't be allowed to do. Laws are passing, bills are kind of being enacted by committees they sit on, and they're benefiting the stocks that they're buying. He wants to ban it, and he wants to kind of do it in a way that I think is probably the most reasonable one we've seen to date. He would ban individual trading. They would still be allowed to buy broader ETFs. They would still be allowed to have broader blind trusts, and they would just not have to be able to trade individual stocks. It's not that complex. It's not that complicated. A lot of Americans already do it. The politicians should just follow suit and have that be their law as well.
Yeah, leveling the playing field. It seems like there's bipartisan support for a congressional stock trading ban, but there's also bipartisan opposition of it. So why do you think we haven't seen this kind of legislation pass, or at least be thoroughly debated in Washington?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like the thing that you're getting at is we've heard these bills for years. Like there's been bills, people have talked about getting them passed. This is the first one that the GOP actually backs. Now, AOC, Elizabeth Warren, and the Democrats, they actually don't support the bill that he wants passed because, one, they want politicians to divest completely out of their own investments. So if they were to be a politician on January 1st, they would have to divest out of all their stocks. That's what the Democrats want. The Republicans don't want that. The Democrats also want this new law, the Stop Insider Trading Act, to also cover the president and the VP. The GOP one does not include the president and the VP. And that is where we think the biggest divide is going to happen. And this is why also I don't know if it will pass. It's going to go back and forth. And on top of that, we got midterms coming up. If it flips to the Democrats, who knows what will happen.
Sounds like we got a long way to go. But before we let you go, I got to ask you, what exactly is an inverse Kramer?
Yeah. So we created essentially the first way to trade alongside politician stock trades. And what we also did was create an algorithm that tracks Jim Cramer's stock picks on CNBC. And we built a way to just essentially invest in the opposite of whatever he does. So if he's bullish on PayPal.
Is it because he's wrong? Okay.
Yeah. That is the thing. And actually, for what it's worth, I think he's up 15% more than Nancy Pelosi this year.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to make some money, I suggest you follow Chris Joseph and his work, because he basically just tells you what the politicians are doing, and they're making a lot of money. So thank you for your service, sir. We'll be following this, and hopefully we'll get some movement on it soon. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Have a good one. All right, moving on to south of the border, because we're now getting photos of El Mencho's final hideout before his death over the weekend. El Mencho was, of course, the Mexican drug lord who controlled one of the country's most powerful cartels. He spent his last few hours here at a luxury villa, just hours from any major town, and his lover was with him. Looks like they didn't have much time to clean up after themselves. The kitchen looked like a bomb had gone off, with rotten fruit and discarded takeout on the countertops and beds that were left unmade, possibly a result of them being disrupted in the middle of the night. Vials of a powerful kidney failure medication were found throughout the house, including in this freezer. Mencho was injured during a military raid here and died while being transported to the hospital by helicopter. Switching gears, teams of investigators returned to Nancy Guthrie's home today as tips pour in. We're talking search and rescue and talking to a new search and rescue group, the Cajun Navy, on their offer to help find Nancy. They say they have a search plan and they're just waiting on the sheriff to play ball. Plus, a major moment last night when Delilah Coleman was honored with a roaring applause at the State of the Union.
Delilah, please, you are a great inspiration. Please stand up.
She's the inspiration for a very important new immigration bill. And tonight, Delilah is here with her mom and dad, and they have a huge announcement. Don't go anywhere.
You're lying.
Well, today there was a lot of new activity in the search for Nancy Guthrie. NewsNation was on the scene at Nancy's home when teams of investigators showed up in unmarked SUVs and walked into the garage and around the yard. We don't know if they found anything, but we do know that the FBI has already gotten more than 1,500 new tips since the Guthrie family offered a $1 million reward. Also new tonight, the United Cajun Navy is offering their help. It's a nonprofit that specializes in search and rescue operations. Last summer, they helped look for dozens of missing children after the tragic Texas floods. Joining us now is NewsNation's senior national correspondent Brian Enton, Jonathan Gilliam, former FBI special agent and former Navy SEAL, and Josh Gill, Cajun Navy incident commander. So, Brian, tell us more about the new activity around Nancy's home today.
Yeah, Katie, I'm learning that some of those people who you just saw in our drone shot are actually prosecutors, that prosecutors from Pima County wanted to tour the property and see the house and see the crime scene for themselves. And we saw them walk around the outside of the property. We saw them in the guest house. We also saw them go inside the house. And new tonight, just within the last couple of minutes, sources are telling NBC News, and I'm always interested in the NBC News reporting just because that's where Savannah Guthrie works, so you'd imagine some of this stuff goes through her. But they are reporting tonight that authorities are now preparing to turn Nancy's house back over to the family, which seems pretty significant because it's been under Sheriff's Office control now for the last couple of weeks. But today there was the prosecutors walking around. You can see more video of them here. There were also FBI agents going in and out of the house, and several, SUVs you couldn't see in. The windows were tinted. We couldn't see who was inside, but they were also coming and going from the house, Katie.
Brian, is that why the sheriff's department is saying that media is not going to be allowed to park inside of the neighborhood at some point soon?
We can't figure that out. They seem to want to get rid of us, Katie. I mean, they're not going to let us park anywhere in the neighborhood starting tomorrow, which some of the neighbors are upset about. I mean, we've made friends with a lot of the neighbors who are like, they love Nancy. So they're saying, please, we don't want you to leave until Nancy is found.
Yeah.
The sheriff's office is saying, neighbors have been complaining, but for the most part, the neighbors seem okay with us being here. So we don't really understand it.
Well, maybe some of the neighbors will let you park in their driveways because it's private property and the sheriff can't prevent you from doing that. Jonathan, what do you think this sudden increase in activity around Nancy's house means? Prosecutors walking through the house maybe just to get a view of what they may be looking at in terms of charges if they find a suspect. What are your thoughts about the new information we have?
Well, I think first of all, they can go back to this house 1,000 times and potentially find other pieces of evidence if they come up with another lead or they have a thought about, how somebody could have gotten in there or something. I mean, they may have a theory that they want to check out, but if they're going to turn this house over pretty soon, it's always best to go through and scrub it one more time. I'm not actually sure who all was there today because we had one SUV that pulled into the garage and closed the door. I heard Brian earlier on today saying that possibly that could have been somebody from the family. I was thinking the same thing when he said that. But it would make sense that they're getting ready to turn the home over. So, you know, I think a lot of the stuff that we're seeing with the DNA revealing nothing, but the investigation still moving forward, and the way the sheriff has acted, I think it's been a wrestling game of expectations versus evidence. And in a case like this, even when somebody is there and then they're just not there, sometimes the evidence is just, it's not presented at first. And the evidence that is, we can't lose hope because it doesn't lead somewhere, because evidence will lead where it leads, and you cannot try to push the evidence in the direction that you want to go. If it doesn't lead to something, you have to turn to the next piece of evidence and start looking at that. And so I believe, just like we saw at, I forget which college it was that had the shooting, law enforcement is doing diligent work while executives are having terrible press conferences and bad relations. So I'm not fearful that there is good work going on.
Yeah, Josh, the most important part of this whole investigation, of course, is finding Nancy Guthrie, and that has not happened yet. You're from the Cajun Navy. You guys have search and rescue expertise. Have you heard anything from Arizona authorities about requesting your help? And what unique skills do you have to bring to the search? You're outside, you're in the woods searching now around the area. What can you tell us about your operations?
Sure. So good evening, everybody. First of all, I agree 100%. You know, there needs to be some expectation management by everybody that's going on right now. And these law enforcement officials are doing the best they could possibly do. Everybody wants to bring Nancy home and provide some closure back to the family as well as the community. We have not heard back from law enforcement. They're extremely busy. I have provided an operational plan to them that delineates and defines all the resources we can bring to bear, from additional boots on the ground to scent specific, as well as HRD dogs, and then drones, and then just some other subject matter experts in the search and rescue, search and recovery realm.
Just to follow up on that, is it difficult to search at night because it's a dark sky city and there's a lack of streetlights, or do you have the resources you need to search through all hours of the day?
Sure, we've got drones with thermal capabilities. And again, these are resources that are all available to law enforcement. We just need the word.
All right. Well, Brian, have you heard anything new about this reported suspicious man that a neighbor said they saw 2 weeks ago before Nancy's disappearance at all?
Yeah, I've heard a couple of things about suspicious people in the neighborhood. There's been a couple of suspicious characters that people have brought up. I'm not sure that's going to really add up to anything, especially now that we know, Katie, through our sources, that that this person at the front door was here in the days prior. So this was likely planned. He was likely casing the house. I keep hearing the January 11th date. They've been going to the neighbors' houses asking specifically for video from January 11th, which is weeks before Nancy went missing. So if that first photo is from January 11th, I'll tell you, the neighbors are like terrified by that, because that means this guy was out here, again, weeks and weeks before, just casing the neighborhood.
Well, and also these pieces of property, these homes are on acreage. They're not right next to each other. These front door cameras, backyard cameras can only go so far. So even if he was in the neighborhood, maybe he wasn't even caught on those cameras. Josh, before we go, what is your plan for search tomorrow? Are you searching near Nancy's home, in other areas? How are you getting information about where you should be looking?
So we've got a tip line set up. See that's reported. I can't remember the exact name. I've gone through so much today. Going to start scrubbing through some of the tips that we receive, and as we just go through there and start looking. Today I spent some time in the hills looking at some of the drains and washes, and kind of playing back and saying, hey, what would be a potential place where somebody could drop somebody off? But we have received some tips and some other information on abandoned mine shafts. Other stuff of that sort, and some abandoned dwellings, in the Tucson area. So it's a big area. Again, I think that there needs to be a plan that's put forth, utilizing grid searches and some other technology and some other just specific plans. And that's what we want to see, and what we want to help with is the planning process of this and then operationalizing that plan.
Yeah, not to mention the Mexico international angle as well. Brian Entin, Jonathan Gilliam, and Josh Gill, thank you very much for your expertise. And of course, we'll continue to cover any major breakthroughs. Brian, thank you so much for your excellent reporting.
Hey, thank you. And Josh, I'm in Phoenix if you need me.
Now to a developing situation in the waters near Cuba, where 4 people on a boat from Florida were shot and killed by the Cuban Coast Guard. We'll tell you everything you need to know coming up. And honoring American heroes shouldn't be controversial, but you'll never believe what one CNN host had to say about it. The gloves are coming off, up next. While Democrats heckled Trump, some beautiful moments happened at last night's State of the Union. In addition to welcoming the men's Olympic hockey team, President Trump took the time to recognize humble heroes whose names most Americans didn't know until last night. People like Staff Sergeant Andrew Wolf, who survived a gunshot wound to his head while working to protect Washington, D.C. Or Scott Ruskin, the Coast Guard swimmer who saved the lives of 164 girls during deadly floods in Texas. We were also introduced to the Chief Warrant Officer, Eric Slover, who was wounded while leading the daring operation in Venezuela to capture Nicolas Maduro. And who could forget 100-year-old Captain Royce Williams, who served in World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. These moments were heartwarming and important, but that's not how CNN's Abby Phillips saw it. Despite what Abby said, these moments to acknowledge the heroism and sacrifice of everyday Americans are not some sort of game show stunt. It was about doing what little we can as a country to let those who were recognized and other quiet heroes know that they're not forgotten, that they're appreciated, and that our country will continue to count on men and women like them to carry us into our next 250 years. Well, earlier today, the Cuban Coast Guard shot and killed 4 people on board a U.S.-registered speedboat. 6 other people were on board and are receiving medical attention. An investigation is currently underway, and both DHS and the U.S. Coast Guard are now involved in the matter. Initial information has come mostly from the Cuban government, which says the people on board that boat planned, quote, to unleash terrorism. But Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the United States would independently review the incident. Secretary Rubio also noted an incident like this hasn't happened with Cuba in a long time. Senator Steve Daines responded to this and more when we sat down with him earlier tonight. Watch. Senator Daines, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's great to see you in studio. We
Good
appreciate
to have you
coming
here.
in. Thank
Glad
you.
to
Well,
join you.
last night was a big night in Washington, D.C., but before we get to the response to the State of the Union, I want to get your thoughts on this and what just happened off the coast of Cuba today. We had 4 people who were shot and killed by Cuban border security on board an American-registered speedboat. The incident took place amid heightened tension of Cuba. Of course, the president has talked about regime change there. The Cuban embassy has released a statement stating that Cuba reaffirms its commitment to protecting its territorial waters based on the principle that the national defense is a fundamental pillar for the Cuban state. Secretary of State Marco Rubio also weighed in on this today. But what is just your initial response to what the Cubans are saying and just the incident as a whole?
Right. Well, clearly we need to get to the bottom of exactly what happened, what is the fact pattern. But to think that they use lethal force with maybe just innocent Americans, we got to get the facts, but it's a shocking development. And I've got complete confidence, by the way, in Marco Rubio. He's a great friend of mine, served with him for a long time in the Senate. Big fan of Marco. I'll tell you what, Marco will get to the bottom of this.
Sticking to foreign policy, you have called for regime change in Iran. What do people back home in Montana think about that? And do you think that we're close to that happening? Is a U.S. strike imminent?
Yeah, well, it's up to the people of Iran to do that. I was at the Munich Security Conference, in fact, a week and a half ago. There were over 250,000 people protesting for the overthrow of the regime in Iran. It was amazing. Lindsey Graham spoke in front of that group. It was quite the moment. That was right after Marco Rubio's great speech there in Munich. But I remember the days when the Shah was in power in Iran. We used to have an ally and a friend in the Middle East, in Iran. It was to be a game changer. This is a Berlin Wall moment for the Middle East. I hope there's regime change. You've got these brave Iranians losing their lives as the current regime is slaughtering innocent Iranians. We'll see what happens, but clearly President Trump has got enough force in the area to take action if he decides to do so.
The administration has issued additional sanctions against Iran. That doesn't always work, but it has worked as the broader pressure campaign against the Iranian regime. In terms of the American interest here, you have a number of administration officials, including Vice President J.D. Vance today, saying that the Iranians are continuing to pursue a nuclear program. Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, said that they will not even talk about their ballistic missile program with the United States or others in these negotiations, and that's a huge problem. So what is it about the U.S. interest here and the need for regime change, potentially, given that if the regime stays, they're going to continue this kind of behavior in their pursuit of nuclear weapons, which the president has said is an untenable position.
I don't trust this regime, and why should we? This is a regime that calls out death to America, calls America the big Satan, Israel the little Satan, the primary sponsor of Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis. They are disruptors of the world order. They are a threat to the homeland. This would be a game changer, and I hope the Iranian people succeed in overthrowing the current regime.
Getting back to Capitol Hill, of course, the president had a long speech last night, the longest State of the Union address in history, but he talked about the SAVE Act as a key part of his remarks. Let's remind the viewers of what he said and get your response.
I'm asking you to approve the Save America Act. To stop illegal aliens and others who are unpermitted persons from voting in our sacred American elections.
So the SAVE Act was passed in the House. It's waiting for a Senate vote. What's the holdup?
We should put it on the floor and take an up or down vote. It is the most common sense, basic part of election integrity. This is an 80-20 issue for the American people. You think about, we both enjoy the outdoors, we enjoy hunting and fishing. You want to buy a white-tailed doe tag in Montana at Walmart, you got to present a valid ID to shoot a deer. To get a fishing license, you should have to present a valid ID to vote. We should put the bill on the floor of the U.S. Senate. I think you're going to see most Democrats oppose it, most Republicans support it, and call it the Democrats for their failure to support the most basic 80-20 issue.
Why are they opposed? I mean, you have polling even showing that the majority of Democrats agree with voter identification. Why is it that Chuck Schumer, for example, calls it Jim Crow 2.0, and there's opposition in Washington, but not outside of the Beltway?
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, I hope there's enough pressure on the Democrats, because I can't answer that question, why they would oppose that. But clearly, they don't want to see it happen. They will likely stop it, and we need to hold the Democrats accountable for stopping the most basic requirement in our election system, that is a valid ID to vote.
Do Republicans have enough votes to get the SAVE Act passed in the Senate?
I think we do.
Or do you have to change some things? There's been talk of filibusters being removed or talking filibusters being used to get it on the floor for a vote. I mean, you say put it on the floor for up or down vote. Yeah. If it were to come to that, would it pass?
We would have a majority on the Senate, but you need 60 votes to pass it. That's what we've got to have probably 8 or 9 Democrats to join us. We need to call out the Democrats for their failure to support this most common sense requirement, showing an ID there to vote.
All right. Well, Senator, thank you for coming in from one of my favorite states, Montana. Great
my
to see you
favorite
here.
too, Katie.
I'm sure it is. Great to see you. We look forward to having you back.
Great.
Thank you
Thanks.
very much. Last night, President Trump honored Delilah Coleman, the brave little girl who survived a terrible crash caused by an illegal alien truck driver. Her story inspired a new bill that will save lives and keep us all safer on the roads. Delilah and her dad, Marcus, are here live right after the break. Stay tuned.
That's why tonight I'm calling on Congress to pass what we will call the Delilah Law, barring any state from granting commercial driver's licenses to illegal aliens.
Well, it was a moving moment at last night's State of the Union. Delilah Coleman and her father, Marcus, were honored with a huge round of applause after President Trump urged Congress to pass Delilah's Law. In 2024, when Delilah was just 5 years old, her family's car was hit by an 18-wheeler driven by an illegal immigrant who got a commercial driver's license in California. It's a miracle Delilah survived, but her life will never be the same. And now, the Trump administration is taking action to protect innocent Americans. And we are honored tonight to have Delilah and her father, Marcus, join us here again in studio. Great to see you both. The whole country saw you last night at the State of the Union. Tell us about what it was like in the room and what it means for Delilah's future in this piece of legislation.
It was actually amazing inside the room. It was surreal, something that we were not ready for. And right now, I just know that her name's going to be solidified in history and at least in the law books for safety. And that's my major campaign.
So
safety.
the president announced Delilah's Law. What does this piece of legislation mean?
So there's about 7 pieces to it. He mentioned last night the non-domiciled CDL, which is a huge portion of it. And we're still fighting for some other stuff also, such as the brokers being held accountable. They're the main root cause for the non-domiciled CDL drivers being out.
So when you say the word broker, what does that mean? Is that a driving school that is giving out commercial driver's licenses to illegal aliens? What is a broker?
No, the broker is the middleman. So if you have a company, Target, Walmart, they're trying to ship a commodity across, they're the ones that facilitate the shipment. They're going to find the carrier. So that broker is the middleman person. The broker is well knowledge in what company they're going to hire, how many trucks they have, if their FMCSA score is good or not. They're choosing to hire companies that are not vetted. They're choosing to hire companies that hire illegal immigrants because the rates are lower, therefore their profits are larger. So they're putting their profits over the safety of American lives, and they're doing this repeatedly.
And you are a truck driver, so you know this issue very well beyond, of course, this horrific situation that has happened to your family. It looks like there's bipartisan support for this legislation. You've worked with Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy. Do you think that this could be done by the end of the year? How long do you think it's going to take to get this legislation passed to make the roads safer?
The way that we're getting progress right now, it looks like it's going to come pretty quick, and I'm hoping that it does. So we're going to be here in D.C. for the next week and a half pushing her law, for sure.
And who are you talking to specifically on the Hill who's helping you?
I've spoken with FMCSA. I've spoken with a couple of senators, and
it's fun to be on TV, right? You having a fun time dancing? Yeah? Well, I think that there is something to celebrate, I think, that we should talk about. I think there's a reason why Delilah is dancing. Do you want to tell us about who's here and what your big announcement is?
Yes, this is my now fiance, Ileana.
And you tell me about where you guys got engaged this week.
On the South Lawn at the White House. We were visiting the White House, and I proposed to her right there on the South Lawn.
So how did you get that idea?
It's been a long journey for us with Delilah. I've actually been wanting to propose to her for quite some time now, and all the fight that we've had, just with Delilah's case, and her standing there next to me throughout the entire thing, even when she felt this was going to be impossible, she still sat there and pushed me. So there's nobody that I would rather continue life journey with arguing and fighting. No, battling life.
Well, she's always right. You know that, right?
That's the way I live.
Yes.
That's the way I live.
Well,
so,
congratulations. Yeah. You said you're one of very few people who have been able to get engaged at the White House. So that's what they say.
Yeah,
that's an amazing list to join, and we hope that Delilah can remember that when she gets older, and it's absolutely incredible. So when you get new information about the legislation, please let us know. I know that it's a journey, and there's lots that needs to be worked on, but we'd love to know more about what's happening. So you said you're here for a week and a half.
Yes.
What are your goals in terms of progress over the next week?
Getting this thing pushed to the Senate floor. This is something that's very dear to us, and evidently America is well aware of it. We've got huge amounts of support. So on her GoFundMe, a lot of people have started donating now, which is vital to us because that's what's keeping us here. It's very expensive here in D.C.
Of course it is. Yes, it is. You got engaged at the White House. Have you been in touch with officials there about their pressure maybe to get this piece of legislation passed on Capitol Hill?
We're hoping to get some meetings put in this week. So that's the whole purpose of us staying here for the additional time. We've made some contacts there at the White House, but the House of Reps is where we're going to be at.
Well, the president certainly knows who you are. Of course, you got a nice shout out at the State of the Union last night. It's unfortunate it was under these circumstances, but very happy she's getting this attention and the work that you're doing to keep everyone safe. Thank you all very much, Delilah, Marcus, and Ileana. Great to see you, and congratulations on your engagement. And thank you for sharing your amazing moment with us. Really special. Thank you. All right, Jesse Weber joins me next. Keep it right here on Katie Pavlich Tonight. Well, here's one way to get out of work. Take a look at this. 2 cars are completely swallowed by a sinkhole while they're stopped at a red light in Omaha. Incredibly, nobody was hurt. This is one of my biggest fears. Oh my gosh. And watch this. A group of Good Samaritans rushed over and pulled the driver out of the red car in the massive sinkhole while the driver of the silver pickup truck crawled out the passenger window and across the hood. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that they were okay. That does it for us, Jesse. You have something coming up on your show, which I think I can relate to. It's about the millennial State of the Union. Tell me about that.
Well, first of all, I'm kind of stuck on the sinkhole for a second. That's miraculous. Yeah, so first of all, great coverage last night. I was watching you, Leland, and Chris Dyer, Wold. I'm going on my show tonight to talk about my perspective on the State of the Union, millennial perspective. I don't know if people realize this, but by the end of the year, millennials and Gen Z are going to make up, I think, about half of the voting electorate. I mean, that's a big deal. And I talk to friends. I talk to people in my age group. This is like the first time they're interested in politics, getting involved in politics. Sometimes this is the first State of the Union that they've actually watched. So I kind of want to give a unique perspective on the takeaways from that, what matters to them, because this is a really pivotal time in our nation. And I will tell you, that State of the Union was unlike any other State of the Union scene. So that's my take. You're a millennial too, though,
I am
right?
a millennial.
Yeah.
I am a boomer at heart, and I call myself the grumpy millennial. So yes, I'm a millennial, and I gotta take, I like the fact that there was a study that came out recently showing that millennials are just a little smarter than Gen Z. So our little sisters and brothers, we can still hold that over their heads a little bit. I appreciate that.
Look at us. Fantastic.
Look at us.
Fantastic.
We're so smart.
but no, it's an important to get through. And I just want to say again, it was great watching you guys last night. Your first State of the Union with NewsNation. You did a great job.
Yes, it was great, and I look forward to many big events. It was a huge night, and as you said, State of the Union for the ages, longest ever. George Washington's gavel coming out to mark 250 years of America. Amazing. So looking forward to the future. That does it for us tonight, Jesse. Have a great show.
Thank you.